Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Daled, and Mitzvah Hashem today. We will be learning Daf Reish Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn the halachas of Eruvei Chatzeros. We pick up today on the very top line of Reish Lamed Hey Amud Aleph with a brand new Siman, Siman Shin Samach Tes, Be'eza Oifin Maknin Ha'erev. We have some details here regarding how exactly the zichui on the Erev could be done or cannot be done. Ubay Seif Echad, and here we have one sif. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kabeis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Alehem, V'yetziam Yitzaru Lervacha, Me'afelu La'ira, Mishibud L'Geula, Hashta B'Agalo of Izman Kariv and Emar Amein. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Achi Agadol, Meshemer Ben Esther Fradel, for Yitzchak Ben Zion Ben Dusha, Rivka Bashir Aleach, Chava Hadassah Bas Rezel Serel, and Yehoshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malka Chana. They should all have a refuah shalema b'sai shar cheli Yisrael. Our learning should be a schus for all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every single member of Klal Yisrael in these dangerous times and in all times. B'chol makaim shehem. Okay, today's shir, unfortunately, is going to be audio only. Hopefully, I will, so to speak, see you again soon. So, again, we pick up today in Reish Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, top line, new Siman, Siman Shin Samach Tes, Sif Aleph, says the Mechaber. Now, before I even read the words of the Mechaber, let's just do a little visualization over here. So, the Bnei HaChatzer need to get together, and they need to make an Eruvei Chatzeros. So, what do they need? They need pas. They need a loaf of bread, or they need matzah. In order to go ahead and make the Eruvei Chatzeros, somebody is going to take that kikar, someone's going to take the pas, in whatever format it is, and going to hand it off to somebody else. The second person is going to accept it, make a kinyan on it on behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer. That's going to be the Eruvei Chatzeros. Now, every member that lives in the Chatzer, every homeowner in the Chatzer is a shutif in this pas. This pas is going to be placed in one of the Batei HaChatzer, one of the homes in the Chatzer, and by doing so, now it's as if everybody in the Chatzer lives together, either in that bias or they live together in all the Batim. Now there's only one entity in the Chatzer, and now you're allowed to carry from the houses to the Chatzer, from the Chatzer to the houses, and from one house to another house in the Chatzer. So the very first requirement that we have over here is that we need pas. So somebody is going to go to the bakery and somebody is going to buy a kikar. Someone's going to buy some pas. Against that backdrop, says the Mechaber, Hanoisin ma'ois lenachtoim. Somebody who lives in the Chatzer approached the baker, Va'amar loy, and he says to the baker, look, I'm expecting that whoever is going to be in charge of the Eruvei Chatzeros is going to approach you and is going to come to you to buy a kikar. So va'amalai, he says to the baker, Im yavayu b'nei HaChatzer liknais mimcha kikar le'erev. If it should happen that somebody from the Chatzer comes to you to buy a kikar for the purposes of making the Eruvei Chatzeros, do me a favor. Zechei li ba'erev, be kind of for me a chelik in the erev, sheyehei li chelik imahem, so that I should be joined with the erev, b'shvil ma'azu, in return for this money. So, Ruvain goes to Shimon the baker, and Ruvain tells Shimon the baker, look, do me a favor. I think somebody from the Chatzer is going to come to you to purchase a kikar for the purposes of the Eruvei Chatzeros. Here's $1. And in exchange for that $1, make sure that I have a chelik in the Erev, so that I should be joined in the Eruvei Chatzeros. Says the Mechaber, Einoi Erev. That would not be an effective Erev. And the Mechaber goes on, not only will it not be an effective Erev, afilu Erev hachenveni l'chol ha'acherim, v'zacha gam lo zeh imahim. Even if the baker goes ahead, takes a kikar, right? He takes a nice kikar from the bakery, and he hands it off to his friend Levi. And he says, do me a favor, Levi, be zoiche in the Erev on behalf of all of the people in the Chatzer. the Erev is not going to be a good Erev. It's not going to be an effective Erev. And the reason is because Ruvain is not going to be included in this Erev. So again, before we see the Mishnah Berurah and we see the explanation of this halacha, just want to make sure everybody understands what's happening over here. The Nachtoim, the baker, otherwise known here in this sif as the Chenveni, the shopkeeper, is going to be providing a kikar for the Erev Chatzeros. In the scenario that the Mechaber is giving us, in one case at least, the Nachtoim is also going to be one of the parties that's going to perform the Zichui on the Erev. He's going to take the kikar, he's going to hand it off to somebody else, and ask that person to be Zoiche in the Erev for all the Bnei HaChatzer. Ruvain is one of the Bnei HaChatzer. Ruvain thought that he was being very proactive and he was doing a good thing. Ruvain approached Shimon the baker and he said, look, here's $1. In return for this $, make sure that I have a chelik in the Erev. Turns out, Ruvain is not going to have a chelik in the Erev, and since Ruvain doesn't have a chelik in the Erev is not going to be effective, because even if the Erev is effective to join everybody else in the Eruv Chatzeros, Ruvain is going to be a separate entity, and Ruvain is going to aser on all the Bnei HaChatzer. Now let's see what the problem over here is and why this doesn't work. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Aleph. Afilu Erev Achenveni l'chol ha'acherim. What does that mean? Says the Mishnah Berurah. It's an alarmar. What the Mechaber means to say is, Al yedei zikui shezicha lehen al yedei acherim. Even if Shimon the baker, after having been approached by Ruvain and accepting Ruvain's $, subsequent to that, Shimon the baker takes a kikar and hands it off to Levi and asks Levi to be zoiche in it on the behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer, Kedelael b'Siman Shin Samach Vav Siftes, which is the way things are done, as we learned earlier in Shin Samach Vav. Ois Cotton Beis v'Zacha Gam Lozeh. And when he does this, he has Ruvain in mind as well. Bichlal kol b'nei HaChatzer. He hands off, Shimon the baker hands off the kikar to Levi, and he instructs Levi, be zoiche in this kikar on behalf of all the b'nei HaChatzer. V'loi parat shmoi behedya. But he didn't mention Ruvain's name straight out. He didn't tell Levi, look, make sure you're zoiche in this kikar for all the Bnei HaChatzer, including Ruvain. No, he didn't mention Ruvain. He just told Levi, look, be zoiche in the kikar on behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer. This does not work. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah v'hatam. The reason for this is the mistama loy kivein litein loy b'matanas chinam kemoy la'acherim. Now that Ruvain came to Shimon and gave Shimon $1 and asked him, look, here's $1. In return for the $, make sure that I have a chelik in the kikar. And Shimon the baker accepted the $, and said, okay. Now, Shimon's das is we assume that Shimon's das is no longer that when he hands the kikar off to Levi, Levi should be zoicha in the kikar on behalf of Ruvain. He has the rest of the Bnei HaChatzer in mind, but he doesn't have Ruvain in mind. You know why he doesn't have Ruvain in mind? Because what do you mean? I already covered Ruvain. Ruvain gave me $1, and I granted Ruvain a chelik in the kikar in return for his $. Now, you might be shaking your head and say, okay, so what's the problem? So he sold a chelik in the kikar to Ruvain, and everybody else got a free portion in the kikar, because he handed the kikar off to Levi and asked Levi to be zeichet for all the rest of the Bnei HaChatzer. But what's the problem? Bottom line, isn't Ruvain covered? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, he's not covered, because again, Shimon the baker did not have das to give Ruvain a matana, a present, a freebie, as a chelik in the Erev. Ela b'shvil moishen asenlai. He only intended to sell it to him for the $1 that he gave him. Umois einon koinois. But when it comes to something like lechem, when it comes to metaltalin, when it comes to a kikar, to movable objects, the halacha is that kesef does not affect a kinyan. You would have to make a separate kinyan. When Ruvain hands the $1 off to Shimon, the baker, and Shimon accepts the $1, Ruvain never made a kinyan. Ruvain didn't make hagbah on the kikar. There's no hagbah, there's no meshicha, there's no ma'isa kinyan. All there is the transference of the money. Kesef, mois, einun kainais. It doesn't make a kinyan. So now Reuven never actually acquired a chelik in the Erev. When Shimon handed off the Erev to Levi, he told Levi, accept it, be zoichet it on behalf of all the Bnei HaChotzer, but he didn't have Reuven in mind. Why didn't he have Reuven in mind? Because what do you mean? I sold a chelik to Reuven. But that sale did not affect the Kinyan. Nimtza she'en lo chelik be'erev. And now it turns out Reuven has no chelik in the Erev. So that's the problem over here. Okay. Now let's go back to the Mechaber, third line down near the beginning of the line. Aval, however, im amarli arevli. But if Reuven went ahead and approached Shimon the baker, gave him $1, and he didn't say zecheli ba'erev. He didn't say make sure I get a chelik. Instead, what he said was arevli, make an erev for me. Then kana erev. Then the erev is going to work, and Reuven is going to have a chelik in the erev. Why is that? Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Gimel arevli. Gam bekan ma'vi shazika layanachta bechlal im acherim ukamay lamayla. In order for this to work, again, it has to be that Shimon handed off the erev to Levi and asked Levi be zoiche in it for all the Bnei HaChotzer. V'atam dahacha mahani, and the reason that this now works is bishum dekeven da amar arevli, because in this second case, where Reuven went to Shimon and he didn't say zecheli, he didn't say acquire a chelik in the erev for me. Instead, what he said was make an erev for me. That language means that what Reuven was saying to Shimon was, look, make an erev for me. Which means, do whatever you have to do so that the Erev should be a good kosher Erev and I should be part of it. Halachically, we look at this as if he was making Shimon a shliach to go ahead and do the right thing, which means hand it off to Levi, have me in mind together with all the other Bnei HaChotzer, and make sure that it is a kosher Erev. Now, again, we have to understand, this is a din d'Rabbanan. This whole din of Eruv Chatzeros is a din d'Rabbanan. We're being very, in a certain way, we're being very persnickety over here, but in a certain way, we're also making a lot of halachic assumptions. In the first case, it doesn't work, because we're assuming that Reuven's das was to be kaina a chelik in the Erev with mois, with Kinyan Kesef, and Kinyan Kesef doesn't work. We're also making a halachic assumption that since Reuven handed Shimon $1, when Shimon handed off the Erev to Levi and asked Levi to be zoich in it for all the Bnei HaChotzer, he didn't have Reuven in mind. Because what do you mean? I already covered Reuven with a sale. In the second case, where the language is tweaked, and what Reuven says to Shimon is not zecheli, but arevli, then halachically we change our minds. Halachically we look at it, oh, you said arevli? Arevli means make me an erev. Okay, well, in order for the Erev to be a good Erev, then you had to have had Reuven in mind when you handed off the Erev to Levi and asked him to be zoich in it for all the Bnei HaChotzer. Now we're not worried about the fact that Shimon accepted $1 from Reuven previously. Now you understand, we're not calling Shimon the baker to the stand and asking him to affirm that he's going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and pepper him with questions. What did you have in mind? What didn't you have in mind? No, these are rules. The rules govern the halachic assumptions, and that's going to govern Lamaisa whether the Erev is a good Erev or not. Again, we're dealing with the Rabbanans. When we deal with the Rabbanans, these are the kind of things that come up. Let's go weiter over here in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber. I lost the place here. Third line down, middle of the line. Va'afiluim amar zecheli. Now, says the Mechaber, there is a case where Reuven might say to Shimon, zecheli, which was the first case that the Mechaber said is problematic, but there is a case where it will work. Va'afiluim amar zecheli. Even if Reuven went to Shimon the baker and said, zecheli ba'erev, make sure that I have a chelik, acquire for me a chelik in the erev, which we said, if he gave him money, it's not going to work. Im nasan like kli b'teres kinyan sheyikdalaboy. Let's say Reuven didn't give Shimon the baker $1. Instead, Reuven gave Shimon the baker a handkerchief. we're in the run-up to Pesach now. A lot of people are going to be doing Mechiras Chametz. When they do Mechiras Chametz, they're going to come to the Rav. The Rav is going to make a kinyan, right? But you're going to make a kinyan with the Rav to be makdeh him all of your chametz. The Rav is going to hand you a handkerchief, or he's going to hand you a pen, and you're going to pick it up and make a kinyan, and that's like kinyan chalipin. Now the chametz is going to belong to the Rav. The Rav is going to be able to sell it, etc., etc. Let's say that's what happened over here. Ruvain went to Shimon the baker. He didn't give him $1. He gave him a handkerchief. He gave him a keli, b'tayris kinyan, sheyikta labai. So now they use a kinyan chalipin. Kinyan chalipin is effective on a kikar, and therefore kana erev, and therefore in that case the erev would be effective. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton dalit im nasale kli the dafka mois einon kainais ad sheyim sheichachefetz. The problem that we have in the first case is kesef mois does not affect a kinyan on metaltalin. So there's no kinyan until ad sheyim sheichachefetz, until you do something like a kinyan meshicha. But if you give him a keli, have a chalipin, then it's kinyan chalipin. The kevin shazacha zebekli. As soon as Shimon the Nachtai makes a kinyan on the keli, zacha zebapas. Now automatically Ruvain is going to have a chelik in the kikar, sheshayich laha erev, which is going to become the erev. K'moshe isa b'harbe mikaymos. Says the Mechaber Viter. It's the third to last line of this short little siman, right by the ois cut and hay for the Mishnah Berurah. V'chein, similarly, another case that will work. Im zichaloi hanachtoim al yedei acher. If when Shimon the baker hands off the kikar of the erev to Levi, he doesn't just tell Levi, look, be zoiche in it for all the bnei achotzer, but instead, when he tells Levi, be zoiche in it for all the bnei achotzer, including Ruvain. If he spells out that Ruvain should get a chelik and he should be covered in the zichui, or another case, let's say what happened was not that Ruvain came to Shimon the baker and said, look, if the Bnei Achotzer come to you to buy a loaf, make sure for my $1 I get a chelik in the loaf. That's not what happened. What happened was Ruvain came to Shimon. Maybe Shimon's not a baker. Maybe Shimon is the gizbar. Maybe Shimon is the gabbai of the shul. Ruvain knows that the gabbai of the shul is going to have to go out and buy a kikar in order to get together with the Rav and make an Uruvik Hatzeros. So Ruvain goes to Shimon the gabbai and he gives him a $5 bill and he says, look, go ahead and buy the pas for the erev. But he doesn't tell Shimon, make sure I have a chelik in it. No, he's just giving Shimon $5 to go buy the pas. Then kan erev. Then the erev is going to be a good erev. Let's not go there yet. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah's cut and hay. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cut and hay. The first case over here that the Mechaber said is okay is if when Shimon the baker did the zichui together with Levi, he mentioned Levi's name beferish. If what happened is that Shimon the baker handed off the kikar to Levi, and he didn't just tell Levi, look, be zoiche in it for all the bnei achotzer. He said, be zoiche in it for all the bnei achotzer, including Ruvain. After in such a case, even though kesef doesn't affect the kinyan, but now it's very clear that Shimon the baker was not trying to cover Ruvain with the kinyan kesef. He spelled out Ruvain when he did the zichui with Levi. That's the difference between this case, which the Mechaber says the erev will be effective, and the first case of the siman where he said it would not be. We're talking over here where Shimon the baker did the zichui with Levi, with somebody else. However, there are opinions that disagree with this. With Svir Lahud, the Kevin Denasad Mois, there are those that want to say an interesting thing. The problem that we've been worried about until now is that Ruvain is not going to be covered with the zichui because Shimon the baker thinks he already covered Ruvain with the kinyan kesef, and the kinyan kesef doesn't work. Therefore, the Mechaber said, but if Shimon the baker spells out when he hands the Eruv to Levi, so that Levi can be zoichin it for Bnei HaChotzer. If he spells out to Levi, make sure that you include Ruvain, then it's okay. But the Mishnah Berurah brings down, there are those who disagree for an interesting reason. They say it's very nice that Shimon the baker, when he hands off the kikar to Levi, tells Levi to have Ruvain in mind. But maybe Ruvain doesn't agree to this. Maybe Ruvain is not willing, Sainai Matoinos Yichya. Maybe Ruvain's not interested in accepting a chelik in the pas of the Eruv as a freebie. He's one of these sticklers. He turns around and he says, I don't know why this is right. All the Bnei HaChotzer are getting a free chelik in the pas of the Eruv. I don't want to accept it for nothing. I made sure to give Shimon the Nachtam $1. So in that case, it's almost as if he's saying, I don't want the zichui between Ruvain and Levi to work. I want to get it on behalf of my dollar. And these Shitas say that would be problematic, so they disagree with the Mechaber's position. Okay, going weiter. Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Zayin. Oy Shakana, another case where the Mechaber said this would be okay, is the case where Ruvain gave a balabas, right? He gave the gabbai of the shul, let's say, he gave him $5, and he said, go out and buy a kikar for the Eruv. In that case, it's not pshat that he's trying to buy his chelik of the Eruv with the $5. No, he's just giving Shimon a $5 bill and saying, look, somebody has to buy a kikar lechem to make the Eruv. Go ahead and buy the kikar. Go ahead and buy the kikar, and I'll get a chelik in the Eruv the same way everybody else will get a chelik in the Eruv. Okay, now let's do the last case over here in the Siman. Says the Mechaber, V'im nasalei mala balabayis. Let's say he gives money not to Shimon the baker. Let's say Ruvain gives money to Stama balabayis in the Chotzer. V'amar leis cheli be'eruv. So this is exactly the same case as the first case of the Siman. The difference between the first case in the Siman and this case is that in the first case of the Siman, Ruvain approached Shimon the baker. Now Shimon the baker, his livelihood is selling loaves of bread. So therefore, when Ruvain gives $1 to Shimon the baker and says, Zechei li ba'eruv, Shimon the baker, who's always in the habit of selling bread, is selling Ruvain a chelik in the Eruv. And that's why it becomes problematic, because he's trying to be kaina his chelik in the Eruv with kesef, and mois einon kainos. But if Shimon is not a baker, if Shimon is just one of the homeowners in the Chotzer, and he just happens to be, one of the Askanim in the Chotzer, and he's going to be dealing with the Yeruve Chatzeros, and Ruvain goes to Shimon the Askin and says, look, here's $1, make sure I have a chelik in the Eruv, then it's not a problem. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Katan Ches. Mala balabayis. Of course, Ruvain gives the $1 to Shimon the Askin. Shimon the Askin is going to get a kikar lechem to make the Yeruve Chatzeris out of, and then Shimon the Askin is going to hand off the kikar lechem to Levi and tell Levi to be zoichin it for all the Bnei HaChotzer. And now it works. The reason it works in this case is because Shimon the Askin is not in the habit of selling bread. And in such a case, we assume that Ruvain's instruction to Shimon, do me a favor, here's $1, make sure I have a chelik in the Eruv, was not sell me a chelik in the Eruv. What are you telling Shimon the Askin? Sell me a chelik in the Eruv. Shimon the Askin doesn't sell bread. So what is he doing? He's giving him $1 and saying, do me a favor, I'm making you a shliach to make sure that I have a proper chelik in the Eruv. Well, the way to make sure that Ruvain has a proper chelik in the Eruv is to include him in the zichui when you hand off the kikar to Levi, not to sell him a chelik and try to have him be kind with mois, right? So over here, why did Ruvain give him $1? I don't know why Ruvain gave him $1. Kasha of a maisa. Maybe because he's doing him a favor and he doesn't want him to metriach him, so he's giving him $1. But we don't look at it now as if he's trying to be kind of chelik in the kikar with his dollar, because he's giving it to somebody who doesn't sell bread. It becomes like the second case of this siman, where he said aravli, which we understand as meaning, make sure you do the right thing and cover all the bases, and make sure I have a good halachic chelik in the Erev, so that the Erev should work. Okay, that was Siman Shin Sav Tes. Let's start Siman Shin Ayin Dinei Shituf Be'erev. Some more details of the partnership of the Erev. Ubay Ches Seifim, and here we have 8 Seifim. Says the Mechaber. We already mentioned earlier the case of a base shar. A base shar is a little gateway at the opening of the chutzner. So you come into the chutzner, and maybe there's like a guard booth at the entrance to the chutzner. We spoke about an achsadra. An achsadra is also like a little portico, a roofed over portico at the opening of the chutzner. We spoke about a mirpeset. A mirpeset, let's say you have a 2-story building inside the chutzner, and there are units on the second floor that open up onto a long porch. So when you want to go into the second-story units of this building, you go up a staircase to the mirpeset, and from the mirpeset, you get entrance to all of the second-story units of this building. We learned earlier that people, you can't put the Erev inside a beis shar, an achsadra, or a mirpeset. Why? Because the Erev has to go into one of the batei hachatzer. It has to go into a home in the chutzner. The beis shar, the achsadra, the mirpeset, they are not considered diurin. They're not considered homes in the chutzner. And therefore you cannot place the Erev in one of these types of structures. Now we have another halacha that's based on the same thinking. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Hador bebeis shar. Let's say you have a fellow, Nebuch, he's not doing well financially. He can't afford his own home. He can't even rent a home. So what he did was, he set up shop in the beis shar, the achsadra, or the mirpeset. He took a mattress and a little, night table, and he put it in the beis shar, he put it in the achsadra, he put it in the mirpeset, and unfortunately, that's where he's living. So Hadar bebeis shar, achsadra, mirpeset, shabachotzer, question is, does he have to contribute to the Yeruv Chatzeros? If he does not contribute to the Yeruv Chatzeros, does he aser on all of the other residents of the chutzner? In other words, is he considered somebody who has a home in the chutzner? Is the beis shar his home? Is the achsadra his home? Is the mirpeset his home? Says the Mechaber, no. Einoi oiser al b'nei chutzner. He does not aser on the b'nei chutzner. You know why? She'enam chashuvim dira. It's very nice that he sleeps there. You know what he is? He's a homeless guy. He doesn't have a home. This is not a residence that asers on the other b'nei chutzner. Aval hadar bebeis hateven. But if in the chutzner there is a structure that is used as storage for straw, bebeis ha'etzim, or it is a wood shed, right? There's a big wood shed in the chutzner where they keep the firewood. Bebeis habakar, if there's a barn, ubebeis ha'oitzaros, or there's some kind of storage unit. There's a machsan in the chutzner, a storage unit. Oiser. If somebody puts a mattress, a bed in one of these type of structures that is considered a dira, he would aser on the rest of the bnei chutzner unless he contributes to the Yeruv Chatzeros. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph, Adar bebeis shar, lo yishtada. This is a very interesting Mishnah Berurah, and we're going to have to come back to this Mishnah Berurah in tomorrow's shir. Says the Mishnah Berurah, when we talk about a beis shar, lo yishna shel rabim, v'lo yishna shel yochid. It doesn't matter if this is a beis shar that serves a chutzner that has a rabim in it, or it's a beis shar that serves a chutzner that has only one house in it. Okay, let's take a step back. Why is a beis shar not considered a dira? I mean, let's think about this for a second. If you have a beis shar, if you have a guard booth at the opening of the chutzner, and it's big enough to put in a bed and a night table, and maybe a little table, why isn't it a dira? The answer, we learned this earlier, the answer is because a beis shar is a place that all of the bnei chutzner are constantly traipsing through, right? All the Bnei HaChotzer, every time they go into the Chotzer or go out of the Chotzer, they have to walk through this guard booth. That is not a dira. It's a place that the public is constantly walking through. That cannot be considered a private dira, right? People are going in and out, in and out, in and out all the time. That's not a home. Okay, so we could understand that if you have a Chotzer that has 2 homes in it or more, and there's a Beishar, it's okay. I can understand. There are people constantly going through the Beishar. But let's say you have a Chotzer that only has 1 home in it. If a Chotzer only has 1 home in it, then besides the person who's trying to live in the Beishar, there's only one other person, or maybe one other family, that's walking through the Beishar. So it's not a Rabbim. Is that enough to invalidate the Beishar as a dira? Says the Mechaber, says the Mishnah Berurah, yes. Lo yishtar shel Rabbim, v'lo yishtar shel Yochid. It doesn't matter if this Beishar is a Beishar shel Rabbim, meaning it's a Beishar of a Chotzer that has a Rabbim living in it, at least 2 homes, or it's a Beishar of a Chotzer that's a Chotzer of a Yochid. The Chotzer only has 1 other home in it, and now it has a Beishar. You might think that since there's only 1 other unit here, maybe that doesn't invalidate the Beishar as being a residence. Now, if the Beishar is a residence, the Chotzer has 2 residents, and now it needs an Eruv Chatzeros. Kamash Balon, no, it's still not considered a dira. Okay. Even if this Beishar has 4 walls, Gamu Makura, and even if it's also roofed over, since people walk through it, it's not a dira. That's why I say we're going to have to come back to it tomorrow. Ois cotton bays umir peset. Pirusha, the explanation of a mirpeset, Mavurla Kamam b'Siman Shin Ayin Hey. We'll see in Siman Shin Ayin Hey. I already explained to you what a mirpeset is. Ois Katan Gimel, Einay Oiser, all of these structures do not aser on the other Bnei HaChotzer. Im Lo Nasa Chelik Be'erev. If they did not become part of the Erev, they still do not aser on the other residents of the Chotzer because they're not considered a dira in the Chotzer. A sukkah on sukkahs is also not considered a dira. A micro house, a tiny house, if it's not Dalad Amos al Dalad Amos, it doesn't aser the loich hashiva dira. Again, it's not considered to be a dira. Ois cotton hay aval hadar, somebody who lives in a barn or a storage shed of some kind, they do aser on the other bnei HaChotzer techashuvim dira, even though nobody wants to live in a barn. But still, a barn is a choshev enough structure that if somebody does set up shop and live in it, he could be considered a residence in the Chotzer. Even if its structure is very flimsy. If he eats in the barn, even if he doesn't sleep there, mikri dira, that's also enough to call it a dira, to become pita gairim, because we go after where a person eats. All of these type of structures would aser on the Bnei HaChotzer, unless the fellow who's living there joins in the Erev. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe should send Yeshua Sefurus Panach Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kel Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu Amen. Be well.